The next that we have online is Mr. Peter Schellenberger. Peter is going to talk a little bit about Work Package 2, which he is looking after, working together with A-Star and Simtech. Work Package 2 is about standardization of catalog and package implementation. And Peter, before I hand the time over to him, I just want to give him some introduction. Again, all these are very truncated, and with the list of this distinguished panelists and speakers, is not doing justice. But I think in respect of time, I will just give a short introduction of Peter. Peter is the VP of products of the eGenie Council, so he looks after all the products and the catalogs. He is also the Vice President of Group Global Supply Chain at Thome Ship Management. He is passionate about adopting technology in supply chain and has created an e-procurement platform for vessels and third-party customers in his last appointment at OSERV. So, yeah, Peter, your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for the warm welcome. And I think we're a little bit behind, so please bear with me if I'm jumping right into things. And I came a little bit by coincidence into this, and the reason is that over the last couple of years, when I was a ship chandler and also when I was on the procurement side, I have always mourned the missing of standardization in terms of items, item descriptions. I have always mourned that there is not an organization that does it for me, whether that was IMBA or ISA or whatever other organizations were trying to organize things. There was never really what you would call a true cooperation between the industry players. And so we have always mourned this issue, but we have never found a real solution. And where it was most painful is it was in three areas. The first one was, of course, stores. It is funny, it is only less than 10% of the vessel spend, but purchasers in an organization tend to spend up to 50% of their time with consumables. So you can imagine how much of an inefficiency that is. Consumables is also provisions. So for the purchases that look after provisions are not under catering, they have similar issues where also a lot of the items are not captured in a very structured way with clear specifications in systems. And the third part, and that is probably the most difficult part, is also spares, where there's not a very clear classification of spares, particularly when it comes to purchases with normal experience. They have very often also problems to differentiate between original spares, definition of OEMs and copy parts. And so that results in a lot of inefficiencies, wrong quotations, deliveries, and everything else. So it was really one of the targets to try to find ways to finally bring some of the industry players together and try to find a new language, a USB stick for that part of the industry, and find brand agnostic definitions so that we could all, for the benefit of the industry, have tools on hand that drive efficiencies. Efficiencies, of course, in terms of the users, that's mostly ship managers and owners that have to place tenders in their most common ports. And the other thing is, of course, the suppliers who, for a lot of those items, particularly the critical ones, keep up to 3 or 4 different qualities for the various clients. So the challenge that we still have, and we're trying to face it together, is to define an acceptable medium standard, reasonable maritime standard. And we cannot cover the absolute bottom or the absolute top, but something where we could say that with a clear view of a safe side that we take on safety items, that we take on items that are crew convenience items. I'm not talking about the stores, crew convenience items, and everything that's hot or moving fast, where we want to be extremely safe. We have said we would like to find a way forward to create 2 products for eGenie members to use. And I will talk a little bit more about this. Can you go to the next slide, please? So what we're doing is that we are analyzing through data contribution. Oh, sorry, let me start one more time. The two products that we're looking for as an end result of this work process two is two things. The first one is a tender list based on an Excel sheet that very clearly describes the items as they are, with features, certifications, and a clear description, so that they can be clearly identified by both sides, the clients and the suppliers, for a tender quotation. So we have said that we will analyze 98% of the usual spend, and we are still in the last stages of verification. So that will be an item list of about 10,000 technical stores items. Now, with this tender list, later on the manager or ship owner can choose what percentage he wants to have covered in a tender. So if he says, okay, 80% of the items I want to be covered, so that may be about 2,500 items. And this one then he can spread to the suppliers, and the suppliers have the very good side effect that by now they really have a much more reliable standard as to what they quote and what they also can keep stocks of later on. So that should be a huge driver for the efficiencies. Also, with what John said, that the plan is that for most of the clients who have halfway sophisticated systems later on, they can semi-automate the processing of such orders against fixed prices in tenders. And that should eliminate also the need for 3 quotations for the same items in the same place so many times a year. That will bring down the operating cost for both sides eventually, which we can then use as a better OPEX costing. The second product that we want to get out is a simple catalog, which basically is based on the same data set, probably on 80%. What that catalog is supposed to do is to provide the missing link that I've always complained about between what is being done in the office. That means what the companies have chosen for the vessels was very often not clear to them. Also, did they not know whether what was delivered by the suppliers as they receive it, whether this was exactly what has been defined. So that simple catalog that we are about to create with this initiative is not only containing the descriptions and specifications and approvals and things like that, but also an item picture, which will enable the vessels at the beginning of the RFQ to put together their inquiry, which then will be exported in their order processing system, but also, and more importantly, also as they receive the items, they can actually compare whether what they have received is according to the standards that we have all agreed on. We will never find 100% common line here, but, and that is something that I want to refer back to for what was mentioned earlier. We have been trying, and please go to the next, we have been trying to start this industry movement by getting a lot of the important players on board. First of all, to share data, because if we want to create a meaningful catalog, we need to have some of the more respected and also similar-minded companies on board. And that is, of course, taking into account not only the clients, but also, and very importantly, the main suppliers, and also consulting partners from IT companies and data handlers and things like that. So we have said since this industry is very much still a Me Too industry, a follow-only industry, which doesn't like to take a lot of risks and doesn't adopt new things very easily, we have said that we have to create an initial wave similar to the one that you see behind me, where we have enough credible partners that share their knowledge and data to create something that is a visible product, these two products that I've talked about, and then that can be rolled out towards the rest of the industry. And we are quite confident, if we are preparing it well, that it can then serve as probably something like an industry standard going forward, since it is very useful for all stakeholders also going forward. And when we talk about industry cooperation, it was a very, since we are talking about personal experiences, we had, as part of the item definition, and that was an interesting exercise. About a week ago, we met in Conlash in Singapore to look at 150 items that we thought were particularly difficult to determine on the technical terms and to agree a standard. So we have decided that we put together, under safe distancing measures, groups of people that look at the quality of the various items that the suppliers have suggested as standards. And it was so interesting to see for the first time that some of the largest competitors in both the supply world and the client world were standing together and debating in a very positive and constructive way on what is the best way forward. And I thought, when I was standing there and looking at that, I thought this is actually a very good start to this, and a proof that actually the industry finally can come together and agree on common targets. While I'm talking, I think you have a chance to look at the contributors for this, and you can see that you find some of the very respectable names that have dedicated a lot of time and effort to this, and I want to thank them at the same time. Together with me in this work process too is also representing the part for the spare parts, which we will tackle after the provisions. Provisions as a next step is planned for Q4, and end of Q4 we will dive into stores most probably. That is Lars Brennecke from Eastman and Hamburg, who's also here. So we are trying to drive this together as fast as we can. As far as the utilization of the final data set, which hopefully we have in the next few weeks, when these two products are ready to be presented, Thome Group will be the first one to apply this across our fleet of 220 plus vessels, so that we can have the proof of concept as quickly as we can. Next, please. So there was a question, or we are very mindful, since we're an industry initiative without any commercial interest, that we don't want to stand on anyone's toes. We appreciate everyone's contribution. It's an open platform without real restrictions for contribution, but it also means we have to be very mindful of IP rights and properties. So we have decided that we will come up with our own system of product identification, with the full knowledge that at this moment most part of the industry is working with IMPA codes. At the same time, we also know that IMPA is, as much as what it has done for the industry, is not perfect in both quality of description, completeness, and also with a 6-digit number, not able to give us all the quality and descriptive leads that we want to have in a new system going forward. That was the reason why we're coming up with a system of our own that gives us much more additional possibilities to be as descriptive and clear as possible. By the way, this approach is completely brand agnostic, but of course, every company that is planning to use the template for tendering can add brands as they want it. For subcategories or types, for example, tools and things like that. So the numbering system will be introduced to all interested parties in a membership drive that we are going to be part of as soon as we have these two products presentable. We feel that with the contributors that we have now, we can do a fantastic proof of concept, and it's good enough to drive it out and then create the interest that we need. And we are quite confident that we will be able to have a much wider spread afterwards, but we want to have something to show first. Next, please. I don't want to go too much into this. We are, of course, aware of the subcategories as they are today, but there will be a few more because there is some areas that are underrepresented or misrepresented. So we are combining some of the known categories and adding some. So whoever later on will spend some time with our catalog and the tender list will see. Next, please. When you talk about catalog, I just want to give you an example how such a catalog could look like. And of course, we are inspired by what I would call the real world, that is the Lazada, Amazon space that we have, while we're not trying to imitate that in any way, and why we have in the marine world very special conditions. We just want to be guided by whatever is possible there. So it gives you a first idea of how an item could be described in a catalog page. So that is what we're working on. Next, please. This is very small. I'm quite aware of that. I just would like to show you what we understand by defining the items in much more detail and adding also meaningful pictures to it, so that the people on board are able to identify things. So while on the left side you would see the typical IMPA description as it is, you could see that on the right hand side we have then added the features that in agreement, that is, for example, the results of the 150 item physical audit that we have done last week, or an excerpt from that. So you could see that particularly an item that looks so simple, like a dinner fork, it needs, in the interest of well-being of the crew, because it's a true convenience item, it needs some more addressing, which we thought was well described by dishwasher safe, doesn't bend easily, including the teeth, it has rounded edges, it's not simply a metal stamped item, and the weight should be more than 70 grams. That way, even an agnostic item like a fork, I think every supplier would know better what kind of quality we're looking for, right? So maybe on the next slide, we can see some more examples. It gets very complicated when you come to items like boiler suits, because very often every company has different ideas there. But we tried our very best to find a way that could be agreeable to most. Yeah, so you get an idea how this catalog tender document will look like in the future. Of course, this will come along with the new item description number. At this moment, as a reference only, it's based on IMPA, but it will change. All right, I think I'm just about in my time, and would like to thank you very much for the support, and please watch this space as we are trying to roll out the results in the next few weeks.